So before starting, I want to give a special thanks to CCIR for making this remarkable opportunity possible. And of course, I'm very, very grateful to my mentor, without whose relentless commitment, this would probably have not been possible. So I would like to start off with this thought. Imagine two young immigrants embarking upon the American journey, one from a small rural town in Mexico and another from a bustling city in China. Both arrive on the US soil, fueled by hope, determination to fulfill their American dream, finally. Yet 20 years later, you see that one has climbed the economic parity above the native-born Americans, and another one is still striving and struggling to close the income gap with the native-born Americans. Why does some races outpace the other, and what factors bends the road for economic assimilation of certain individuals or certain immigrant cohort groups? Good morning, everyone. My name is Adhyaa and I'm honored to share my research with you today, titled Comparative Analysis of the Impact of Economic Integration of Mexican and Chinese Immigrants in the United States of America. This presentation shall follow the structure of my ideas, guiding you first through the motivation behind studying this. Why exactly must we study or embark upon immigration studies in the first place? Secondly, the methodology I used, my key findings, and lastly, the policy implications of my research. Our goal this afternoon collectively is therefore to thoughtfully examine how the importance of the two largest immigrant groups in the United States of America, how they, Mexicans and the Chinese, integrate into the economy, and what their experience can reveal on a larger scale about the dynamics of economic integration everywhere. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please.
Sorry.
Right. So, firstly, with regards to the motivation for my study, why exactly should we study immigrant assimilation? Why focus on Mexican and Chinese immigrants especially? In the United States of America, the Mexicans and the Chinese represent two significant yet diametrically opposite groups, as you may have it. By examining them from side to side, we can understand how integration beyond stereotypes takes place. Mexican and Chinese immigrants often have contrasting starting points. While the Mexican immigrants, broadly speaking, arrive with limited formal education and low-wage jobs, whereas the Chinese immigrants arrive through more skill-based platforms, perhaps to pursue graduate schools or even to start a startup in countries like US, which has multiple ample opportunities and freer rules to do this as well. These differences therefore make for a compelling comparison of these two immigrant communities which have a compelling backgrounds. Studying their economic integration therefore can illuminate how initial conditions, including education, language ability, immigration policy of their host countries, the reason why they came out of their country in the first place, how these can shape long-term outcomes in the labor market. Ultimately, this research is motivated, therefore, to answering one fundamental question. How and why do different immigrant groups achieve economic success at different rates? And by answering this, we can understand why is it that we must theoretically frame our policies in such a manner that can inclusively include or integrate individuals at the same pace, because it comes with an economic cost. Therefore, this societal perspective is also something we must crucially understand. Successful economic integration matters just not for the immigrants' personal well-being, but for host countries, communities, policymakers, etc. When immigrants achieve high earnings at par with or at least at par with the natives, it signals full participation of individuals in the economy and also improves social cohesions. On the other hand, persistent gap between different immigrant groups says that there are certain barriers, fundamental racial barriers that exist that prevent certain individuals from integrating into the economy and even further preventing individuals to move into these countries in the first place. So therefore, the broader economic health and social equity is something that we must consider. Next slide, please. So based upon why we must study this in the first place, I have my research questions, which is mainly three different questions. Firstly, what are the income and education patterns of the Chinese and Mexican immigrants? In other words, how do these two groups compare with one another in terms of educational attainment and the incomes that they achieve, which ultimately gets translated into their position in society, which strata they belong to? Secondly, how does the labor market respond to different immigrant groups? Here we investigate differences in occupations and occupational outcomes and earnings and controlling factors for education. Are these advantages or disadvantages to the labor market attached to inherently you being Mexican and Chinese? That is, later on we'll see how when you control every other factor out there, that is, two individuals, one Mexican, one Chinese, being in the same occupation, the same educational attainment, they still have differences in income. And why exactly do those differences still persist? And thirdly, what can we learn about US immigration policy as a whole and integration from these comparisons? Based on the outcomes, that is, what lessons can we draw for policy making? And how, therefore, this is so important for policymakers to consider this in the first place. Let us understand that these three questions will frame ultimately our my entire research, in fact, and everything connects back to these preliminary inquiries. Next slide, please. Okay, so I would like to first start with my literature review. That is a basic, as we all know, preliminary ground with which I started off by looking at existing research in the particular field of immigration studies as well. This has also helped me single out exactly what makes my research unique, because if I'm doing something that's already been done, it wouldn't make sense. But these specific sources that I have enlisted over here are so very important because they give me a pre-hypothesis for what I am going to derive further on. That is, I'll get a result from my analysis that I do, the regression analysis which I'm going to do later on as well, and how that exactly complements patterns that have already been noticed in society. So firstly, with regards to Borjas, 1985. This talks about the self-selection theory. What does this theory actually mean? Economist George Borjas proposed that immigrants are not just a random sample of individuals coming in from their host countries. Their decision to immigrate depend upon their conditions back home. That is, certain push factors that push you out of your nation. For instance, immigrants from countries with high income inequality are negatively self-selected. That means they have fewer skills and more to gain by shifting somewhere else, as is the case for Mexican immigrants. Conversely, immigrants from countries with more opportunities, like for example the Chinese immigrants, tend to be positively selected because they have more to contribute towards their home countries and are highly skilled individuals. This theory therefore alerts us on the differences between immigrant groups, who is coming and why are they coming in the first place. Secondly, with regards to Portes and Jo, which is 1993, they talk about the theory of segmented assimilation. So what is segmented assimilation? Not all immigrant groups assimilate or integrate or become a part of the mainstream economy at the same pace as some others. In fact, some groups, serve to integrate in the upward strata of society, the higher income brackets, while some groups naturally integrate into the lower strata of society, the low social economic strata, because of certain barriers and discrimination society already has in place. This concept is highly relevant here because the possibilities of Mexicans and Chinese immigrants getting integrated into the economy would therefore be segmented, because there would be different segments getting assimilated in different stratas in the economy. One perhaps upward mobility, others not so. Thirdly, with regards to the Walters and Gimnaz, which is 2005, talks about intergenerational mobility. We've talked about how the first generation immigrants can integrate into the economy. Now let us understand that when we look at the second generation immigrants onwards, even then there are certain immigrant groups, the second generation immigrant groups, that would actually be able to assimilate quite faster as compared to others. And this depends upon the kind of environment you're exposed to. Simple example, for instance, if I am a Chinese immigrant and my daughter or my son would probably be exposed to greater opportunities if I work as an entrepreneur, greater exposure, greater connectivity networks, which therefore sets the tone for their future as well, as compared to if I'm a struggling Mexican immigrant who's just come in from rural suburb and I started to work here in probably my teenage or something like that. So the importance of factors like community support, educational opportunities also can prevent systemic barriers for certain kind of immigrants, because it's harder for them to do the same thing. So selectivity, structural barriers, and time, that is the temporal second generation effects, are three things that actually had laid the stage for my own research as well. So some may climb slower as compared to others. Think of it like, for instance, two individuals starting a race. One has better equipment, boots, and a map to navigate through to the final destination, while the other individual is just given sandals and told to trek a far harder path to reach the same destination. Next slide. Thank you. So immigrant profiles. Now let us look at what these two immigrant groups actually look like. Before presenting the regression results, the descriptive profiles of each individual. And of course, understand that this is an overall generalized view. This is not the case for every single immigrant who comes from Mexico or from China. So firstly, with regards to the educational attainment, a striking difference in higher education. About 70% of Chinese immigrants who immigrate into the United States already hold a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to, of course, very few Mexican immigrants who actually owe lesser amount for, who actually have a lesser qualification. So at that particular level, this gap is huge and it is significant. It means that the typical Chinese newcomer has stronger formal education and will therefore get translated into better job opportunities for the Chinese individuals, which get translated into better income. That is the MHHI, the median household income, a very important figure with which I have actually analyzed this income attainment of individuals as well. So second stage will be age and the stage of life in which they immigrated to the United States. The Mexican immigrants usually immigrated to the United States at a much younger age, the average being 21.3 years, while the Chinese immigrant come at a much older age, say 29.3 years. So if you were hiring an individual for a company and they say that they're equally skilled, but one seems to be more experienced in terms of the ages, who would you hire more? That's practically the question that we're answering here. A 29-year-old Chinese immigrant coming for graduate school or specialized job will definitely, by default, be preferred more due to our societal structure, our mindset of individuals and the societal structures that we have as well. The stage of one's career that you can, at the time of which you are looking for a job can significantly, affect income, initial earnings as well as the integration speed of individuals as well. Thirdly, with regards to the median household income, so the data is that the Mexican immigrants around annual median household income earnings would be $49,000. And by median household income, I mean everyone in the family, the income earned by every single individual member of the family accounted for together. For the Chinese immigrants, it's $72,000, which is about 1.5 times that of the earned by the Mexican counterpart, while the US median household income is $67,500. And by the way, the reason why I keep referring back to the natives, despite it not being in the title of the presentation itself, is that every single migration study out there always is a baseline for comparison. You cannot directly compare two different, separate immigrant cohort groups, especially when they are so opposite to one another, unless you have a basis of comparison between these two groups. So going back to the household income as well, I think this is self-explanatory that every Chinese immigrant is doing much better in terms of the central tendency, the median on an average level, as compared to the Mexican counterpart. Certain other characteristics which have not been mentioned in the slide, of course, include the societal aspects which easily get translated into the economic forum. Chinese immigrants are more likely to settle down in urban hubs or professional or technical occupations, while Mexican immigrants are often found in agricultural, construction areas or service roles. The areas in which they settle down as well as family together is also really significant. It was observed that most of the Mexican immigrants chose to settle in the co-ethnic areas, that means in individual areas in which other Mexicans were already present, rather than be exposed to a wide diversity of other individuals, whether it be societal, ethnic or economical. Such occupational clustering of individuals in different groups therefore significantly influences their skill profile and segmented opportunities that becomes accessible to them as well. Next slide, please. So let's go on to how I conducted this research after talking about the why and the what. So the methodology that I used can mostly be classified into qualitative and quantitative methods. So basically, starting off with the quantitative methods, I mostly use data from the IPUMS IPUMS USA 2020, which is basically the US harmonized microdata census source, and compared to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the current population survey, or the CPS. From this, I extracted a sample of 250,000 individuals, focusing specifically, of course, on the three immigrant groups: Mexican, Chinese, and the native-born Americans. After extracting this data, I narrowed down the scale to only certain parameters, like say educational attainment or the income source of individuals, and say for instance age, occupation of the individuals, and median household income. And from there, I filtered the data further to only the 2020 data that can be available. And by the way, this is also something that makes my research more unique. The fact that I have actually included data from 2020 and the previous migration studies that have been done in this context have always been limited to about 2018-ish. So this includes the pre-pandemic years as well, and so is a more cleaner and a more updated data. The main key variables that I have used, as I said, household income, educational level, age, occupation, year, nativity or group as well. Gender was also accounted for, but then I chose to use that as a controlling factor. So that is, I completely eliminated the consideration of gender, but gender pay gaps, as we know, is another economic problem that we have to face with today. The model that I used, in fact, I think you can see it over here. So that's my regression model. It's called the OLS model, that is ordinary least squares model, where I took a log of the household income, and more on that later. It allows us to interpret coefficient differences in percentage terms when I take the log of a particular thing. Therefore, that is to say that it will take data purely as percentages and allow us to easily compare just values without any other biasness or prejudice in the data itself. The regression essentially estimates how inherently being a Mexican or a Chinese immigrant influences your income level compared to a native-born person. That is, if you hold every other factor as constant except for the income of individuals, whether it be the education, whether it be the age, whether it be the occupation, everything else is held as constant, then how does your income differ from another individual's income? If you're doing the same job, if you're the same age, and if you have like the same educational attainment as another individual, you will still earn lesser if you are Mexican and not Chinese. Now, the control this is known as the fixed effects or the fixture effects that I have done with regards to even taking only a cross-sectional segment of data for only 2020. In effect, the model asks that how does income differ on average for every of your economic counterpart. Now let us move on to the qualitative methods that I have used. Qualitative methods that I have used. Basically, how is it that why is it that it's so important for us to analyze this regression model more than just numbers, but also look at it in a more analytical lens, that is on-ground situation. I continuously asked, why is it that we see certain things? Why is it that their income still differs if you're the same age and you're the same occupation? Because honestly, it seems counterintuitive that, if you have the same qualifications and you're literally the same as any other person, just your race differs. That shouldn't stop you from earning the same income, but it does. So does it reflect discrimination, different human capital, the historical policy influences of individuals, certain things that, things like data cannot capture? It's worthy noting a particular limitation because of data constraints. In my regression model itself, there still is a limitation, which is the fact that I have used cross-sectional data only for the year 2020. So therefore, I won't be able to study assimilation over a period of time. And to solve this issue, what I have done is that I have taken another variable into consideration. That is, how many years has it been since that family has migrated into United States from another country? So if it has been like 50 years or 60 years, then I'm going to look at that older migrant, so as to say, as being there for a more amount of period of time, and compared to individuals who are newly moving into the United States. And so with this, I can consider economic assimilation impact over a period of time, despite using cross-sectional data. So in summary, what I want to talk to you about as well is that as I started off this speech by talking about how after 20 years of moving into the United States, despite having the same income, ultimately the Chinese end up with more amount of money in their pockets as compared to the Mexicans. You have a crossover effect, so as to say. That is the time period in which one immigrant group crosses over another immigrant group's median income and performance in the economy as well. More on that crossover effect, which I found is a very interesting phenomena later on. Next slide, please. So this is my regression analysis, which I chose to chart down as well. What is the key results that we get from this is that, firstly, some statistics. Chinese immigrants earn about 25.6% higher household income than compared to native-born white privileged Americans. This figure, after controlling for education, age, occupation and year, even gives that the Chinese immigrants are roughly earning 25% more. So even if you have other factors under control, they still earn more than the native-born, native-born Americans, which is actually you can see it. Mostly when you think of the Chinese immigrants in the United States, you think of industries like tech, engineering, medicine, the big shot industries. So that basically, therefore, the entire family structure benefits on that. while the Mexican immigrants, on the other hand, earn 15.5% lower income than the comparative native-born American whites. That is to say that when you control other factors, it still comes around to 15% on an average. And several factors could be at play. For instance, discrimination that they face in the workplace, glass ceilings at work with regards to how much they can earn, maybe, the peer, like lack of community support by other individuals, or maybe, restrictions imposed by their own peer group, and some unobserved factors like English proficiency level of individuals as well, legal status and social capital, that is how much of connections you have with other individuals in the field. And just because I have chosen the occupation of law, for instance, an individual being a lawyer, it does not mean that both the lawyers will be hired in the same, big short firm. Maybe, depending upon certain other factors and other maybe discriminations taken into account as well, the Chinese individual is probably more likely to get hired as compared to a Mexican. So the main two takeaways is that the Chinese advantage persists after controls and the Mexican disadvantage persists and reflects significant segmented labor market entry. So therefore this persistence showed that even if you take data clean and controls, there still are certain things the data cannot capture in the long run. Individuals will still be there as a part of the bottom rung of the economy and labor market, and their moving on to the upper strata of society is going to be much harder because of certain other barriers that are at work. The Chinese immigrant premium suggests the overshooting of a particular norm for individuals that are of a particular community are encouraged more to become entrepreneurial endeavors, to pursue entrepreneurial endeavors, as they see more number of themselves being, CEOs of a company, for instance. And I want to, stop here and tell you one thing, that, even though I've just talked about the Chinese, Mexican immigrants, these individuals are reflective of a broader group of, immigrants all over the United States or even the world. That is, how exactly are these factors universal or globally applicable for all other kind of immigrant groups, where some are more privileged than others, and still when they are facing the, job market, they still get, lesser amount of income or lesser amount of pay despite being at the same level, and therefore are less respectable and reputable in society. The next slide, please. So this is basically this is basically the population level, and my 3 over there is basically reflective of the Chinese immigrants, and the blue over there is reflective of the Mexicans. So basically they are just numbers, and then you can see as you move on to the percentage of the income level in the economy are mostly dominated, except for certain jobs as well, as and when you keep taking more number of population into control. The profiling is such. The next slide, please. Right. Okay. So this is where I want to talk to you about my last concept, which is with regards to the crossover effect in the economy. So this orange line over there is symbolic of the Chinese immigrants, and this yellow line is the Mexicans, and that red line, which is almost parallel, that is the Americans. So see, over a period of time, with approaching years, the Mexicans and the Chinese do start over at the same time, nearly the same point. However, the Chinese are able to go higher, and there's a much steeper slope which is observed, and finally they begin to overtake the Americans after a period of coming into the United States, which is approximately 20 years. And even after 30 years, which is basically the entire temporal chart, the limitation, you can still see that the Mexicans, even though the gap has been closed, that takes place at a very, very slow rate, and the gap still persists very much today. So this is what you call the crossover effect in the economy. That is, the temporal effects of your assimilation into the economy itself. The Mexican immigrant line fails to catch up, and that exactly is, what I want to talk to you about with regards to the discrimination in the economy. The structural constraints that are at play with regards to education and occupation, therefore, act as channels for your economic outcomes as well. And the performance of group over a period of time also talks about career advancement of individual people who are actually, showcased through the data of through a lot of data, like, the income of individuals, etc. So Now what we can understand very, very clearly from this is that there needs to be certain things that needs to be done about, something that needs to be done about this. That is, a policy which will stop individuals from, probably lacking and being stuck in that part of the graph, and also a policy which can perhaps even improve the performance of already wonderful Chinese immigrants in the United States. Next slide, please. So, what I want to dispute over here is a theory which is the one fit for all theory. The one fit for all the American dream just strives to, roll out policies and expect that every individual immigrant or cohort group is going to respond in the same manner, which is not the case. Because as you can see, these groups, the income profile of these individuals, the backgrounds of these individuals are extremely diverse, and therefore they need to be, addressed in very different ways. So for the Chinese immigrants, the best way to address the issues that they face is probably to, with regards to the loosening of visa requirements. These immigrants can be incentivized to come here as students more often and get high-skilled visas, that is job visas, and can easily get green cards to get integrated into the economy much faster, making it very easier for for the US education system itself to develop, because a lot of other individuals will be coming into the economy. Essentially, stopping the brain drain of individuals in reverse. While for the Chinese immigrants, for the Mexican immigrants, the problem is, of course, at the policy level after they come into the economy itself. Certain entrepreneurial incentives can be given to individuals with regards to certain startups that they can be given, certain extra support, that is to ensure that not only equality but equity takes place through protective discrimination of individuals, to integrate them in society, because the economic costs of not having them get integrated is much, much higher. This also includes higher educational access, maybe vocational training, upskilling of, with regards to, now we have the AI revolution coming in, with regards to even basic English language proficiency requirements that can be delivered to, say, second or third generational individuals, which still actually is a glaring, gap which exists. It also includes the preventing systemic labor segmentation, that is to ensure that the owners of companies, the CEOs themselves, they actually are incentivized to hire more diverse group or cohort of individuals into the company, also give certain apprenticeship opportunities for individuals in the college level as well. And of course, we already have programs like, individuals can actually go back to college, finish college, or start college again, regardless of the age, which actually is paying off, but then that is not sufficient enough. The broader takeaways from my talk would therefore be: equal opportunity does not equate to equal income or equal outcome. There needs to be tailored policy for group-specific barriers, and then it needs to be stronger anti-discrimination enforcement. Next slide, please. So, in short, also another thing, if you wish to look at the PDF of my research paper, you can scan this QR code, you'll get a PDF of it. And I think a key takeaway from my entire talk would be that economic assimilation is not just a straight road. It bends with privilege, with policy, and with existence. Every single number that you see on the screen is actually an individual who wishes to pursue the economic dream, the American dream of becoming a CEO, becoming the next big shot of anything, in fact, in any industry all over the world. But they stopped from doing so. But there still remains individuals who can be given opportunities, and they can be made to realize the dream for which they came into, they crossed the borders to come into a country which is so full of opportunities, except these opportunities are just privileged. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for an incredible and insightful presentation. We have extended a bit in terms of the time that we have. But if there is a space for some questions, so if anybody wants to step in.
First of all, great presentation. It was super clear and detailed. I'm curious your take on the model minority myth, and to see if you think that has anything to do with the disparity between not just Mexican immigrants, but like other immigrants in relation to Chinese and Asian immigrants?
Yes, definitely it does. Like, as I said, there are a lot of other parameters that data cannot like capture, and one of them definitely is social, like the mindset or the structure of individuals in society as well. A common myths that we have, or certain common notions, certain prejudices that have been internalized as a result of the functioning of like society, as a result of structural functionalism of different immigrant groups. That definitely does play a role when it comes to hiring individuals in the first place, or even after individuals are hired, probably could determine whether they would be faster promoted than other individuals or be given more or access to more number of opportunities. So yes, that definitely does play a role. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
I'm just curious. This might not be. I admire the detail and the very thoughtful thoughts that you put into the research. But I'm just curious. This might not be part of the scope of your research, but I'm wondering while you are doing research, do you notice if there's any like the government, right? The U.S. government, like the labor skill needs of the country affects the population, like they, the portals for the immigrant to be able to enter the country, and how that impact, the, I'm not sure, like, the skill level and the education level, because like, like if like, for example, like they know certain country produce certain type of skill of workers, and so they tend to open more, like opportunity to certain labor skills market, if that has any impact on, the disparity between the different immigrant groups.
Right. So
I'm just curious.
So if I got it right, you're trying to ask why is it that, why have I centered my research specific in the United States, especially when you have like specialization of certain types of jobs in different countries all over the world?
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of like how, because I don't know the number of population of two groups, right? Mexican population and then Chinese. Like, if there's a tendency for certain more skilled, highly more educated immigrants to be able to enter the United States, from certain country versus from Mexico, and then it tends to be a lower, younger age with a less education. I don't know, like it's being impacted by the policy from the government itself.
Right.
Versus like everybody has an equal opportunity to come in and then has different outcome, versus it's kind of designed to be that way.
Okay.
To people,
So basically, yes, it's true that there is a sort of intuitive knowledge that we can have that the Chinese deserve better. So I mean, because they already have more, they have already undertaken the path to a higher, more tougher path to pursuing a higher form of education as compared to the Mexicans. So they probably deserve that place, and it's all right if Mexicans don't. But then the thing is that as a country, the Mexico or China doesn't have a play when individuals want to go out of the economy. In fact, it actually contributes to their own brain drain. So they wouldn't, be incentivized to send individuals out, but rather to improve the structures in their country itself. Because if you fix a broken system in your country with regards to education or with regards to anything as job opportunities, etc., then there wouldn't be individuals going out in the first place. But now, since we do have certain push factors that have, brought these individuals into America, it's now an American problem, so as to say. And now, why it actually matters that these Mexicans are integrated more? Why is it not okay for them just to be satisfied with the life they have? It's because of the economic costs that come with, there's a lot of joblessness that you see in the United States. And except for that, there's actually underutilization of labor. That is, that there's a capacity of the workforce that you have, and you still are not able to have, certain individuals who are highly qualified not going to a particular job just because their degrees aren't recognized, just because they don't speak proper English as the Chinese do, maybe, just because they don't have proper social connections. So that therefore shows a particular gap in productivity and creativity that can be tapped on and harnessed for better development. And now, especially, this is so very important now, because with regards to the AI revolution, you have like more jobs being created, and you having like basic structural downfalls and basic barriers, like being able to speak English fundamentally itself does not account for you trying to be a part of the workforce anymore. So that is why it's so very important that you need to fix this problem first. Yeah.
I think we have space for one more question.
We are eating into the break time, but I think we are happy to take questions. People who want to break everything. Go ahead, please.
Do you think a certain level of cultural disconnect is a prerequisite for success in a foreign country? Because you talked about how a lot of Mexican immigrants, they prefer to live in communities where other Mexican people live, and that implies a certain level of unwillingness to let go of their lives in Mexico. I don't know about Chinese immigrants, but I would assume on the inverse that there's a difference. They're more disconnected maybe to their Chinese culture, or they're more willing to let go. Do you think that this is significant in their success?
Okay, so my research mainly centers around the fact that there are certain people who are coming into the economy who are qualified enough, and they don't get the job, or they are paid less for the same job, which demotivates these individuals and creates an air or an environment around that community that they would not be recognized no matter how much they work hard to get what they want in society, just because they know that there are certain barriers that will always be there for them along their journey. I just want to make sure that through, at least my researchers want to make sure that these individuals who feel like they are deprived of certain things, the statuses and they're entitled to, are not deprived or done so. Because not only at an individual level, this demotivates the community in the long run, and they feel more, attached or more sentimental to stay in the place that they want to be. But I also want to make sure that on a broader scale, the economy does not get affected by these problems taking place. So what you said, maybe individuals want to have a sort of inertia with regards to the jobs that they're already occupying, and that's okay. But this is for those individuals who are not able to do so, or not able to move up the ladder even when they want to move up the ladder.
Well, thank you so much, Adhyaa. And we have a little break of 5 minutes, and then we go to the last presentation.